Okay, what are you saying, people, and welcome back to my channel. Now today I've got another weekly forex analysis for you guys. So on the screen are the pairs we'll be looking at today, but make sure you stay to the end of the video because I will be going into depth analysis for each pair, what's happened during this week and what could be happening during next week as well. So make sure you stay to the end of the video for that. But with further ado, let's get straight into the video. First up, we've got Euro USD. Okay, so I'm going to start with Euro USD. So for this pair, we had a nice push to the upside at the beginning of the week. Price was looking very bullish and broke through our key level of resistance around 1.21800. So key level daily resistance, as you can see, first test there, nice reaction. Second test there, even bigger reaction all the way down to 1.7. Had a reaction there not too long ago, and as you can see, we had a strong close there on Tuesday, I believe, and now we're currently trading above that level. So as long as this level holds as support, I think we can get more continuation to the upside for Euro USD. However, if we go onto the low time frames like the 4H, you can see we have found some resistance on this time frame here, and price is having a hard time moving past that. So for Euro USD for next week, as long as we hold this level as support, so we don't see a daily close below it, as long as we hold that support, I do expect to see another push to the upside back into that resistance, and potentially further if we break through it, of course, but so far it's acting like a barrier. So you can be looking for longs around that level, 1.21800, and targeting these highs up there. If we do get a breakout, can wait for a retest and then look for continuations back to 1.23500, back to the highs all the way up here, which are daily, weekly highs. So that could potentially be a possible opportunity if we do take out that resistance there. But there's a good possibility that we could have a bit of a range between those two key levels and just see the market trade above it. If we do have a break to the downside, which could still happen, of course, if we do get a daily close below that key level of support, now if we do get close below that daily key level, we can actually see a move to the downside, and you can look to trade that retest, that continuation. We do have this key level, which was our recent swing low of the market around this level here. As you can see, resistance, support, resistance, and actually support, which gave us the move to actually go and break through that key level. So if you do go and break through this key level here and we hold as a retest, so we see a nice daily close below, we come back to retest it, can be looking for shorts and then move back down to this area here in the market. However, if we don't see a daily close below, we'll probably only be looking for longs, expecting more continuation to the upside back into that resistance, and a break of that resistance will probably take us to 1.23500. So need to stay on your toes a little bit, weigh the opportunities, see what we do from a daily point of view, whether we get a close back below here or we just stay above. If we just stay above, only looking for the long opportunities back into this resistance up here, and then if we do see a break of it, can wait for the retest and continue back to highs. So overall biases to the upside for USD, but if we do see a break of that, we can change our bias to bearish and actually see a longer swing to the downside. Next, we're going to take a look at USD JPY. Okay, so next up we've got USD JPY. So for this pair, we saw some more downside continuation for USD JPY, which was expected. We were rejecting this resistance here, and I did say we're going to probably roll over to the downside and come and test this support down here. As you can see, we didn't quite come and test that support, kind of missed it by a few pips, but we did see that move to the downside, and I do expect to see for next week us to roll over and complete that move to the downside and come and test that support there. So for next week, one or two things I'm looking for to happen is if we reject this area of support, hold it, show some bullish confirmations, and look to buy it and anticipate another swing to the upside, because at that point we just have a continuation of this overall kind of sideways movement that we're seeing in the market. Clear support, clear resistance, and the market is just fluctuating between those two levels. So there's a good chance if we do reject this level as support, we could just see another continuation of this sideways movement, another push back into that resistance. So looking for that buying opportunity there. However, if we don't get that and the market is far too bearish and it breaks through that support, then we can wait for a retest, see if it holds as a resistance, and look for continuation to the downside, because the daily is starting to trend to the downside slowly. So we could be seeing a continuation of that and a possible move back into these lows. At that point, potentially expect new lows as well. So looking for two potential opportunities, but again, the key level is important to see what happens with price action when we do get there. So if the market does roll over to come and test that support, see what happens with it. If we reject it or if we break through it, and then potentially if we do break through it, look for those shorts back to those lows around 107,500. But if we do hold, can be looking for longs, anticipate a move back to 109,600 for next week. And next we've got USD CAD. Okay, so next up we've got USD CAD. So USD CAD, as you can see, we're still very bearish here for this pair. Pretty much all time frames is bearish for USD CAD, as you can see from the monthly, taking that down all the way to the 4H and the hourly really. So USD CAD, looking for buying opportunities can be a little bit more risky. I don't want to hold that trade for too long if you are looking for buying opportunities. And on the flip side, if you're looking for selling opportunities, can maybe be a bit more aggressive, look to milk those pips a little bit more. Just because again you've got that confidence on pretty much all time frames there as well. So USD CAD still quite bearish here. We are forming this lower this descending channel actually, so you can see connecting those lower lows and those lower highs, and looking for next week possible buying opportunities at those lows here. So if you do see a nice push to the downside, and if you do look for that third test and the market holds and we see some nice confirmations, can look for possible buys in anticipation for a move higher to come test this upper trend line and just complete that pattern of price making lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs. So looking for buying opportunities around this area here in the market, and looking for a push to this trend line here. If we do see a breakout, can look to test this level here in the market, key level of resistance, which is around 1.21800. As you can see, one test there, second test there, gave this move to the downside, so it does have some value behind it. So overall, USD CAD potentially could see a swing back to that resistance if we do see some more US dollar strength coming into the markets, but again, need to be a bit careful. First targets will be that trend line there, and second will be the resistance up there. So looking for buys for next week for USD CAD, but won't be holding for that trade for too long. Of course, if we still remain bearish, then again the market could easily go and break through this trend line and go a lot further. So not buying blindly at that trend line, but waiting for confirmations, wait to see the market change from bearish to bullish, and potentially can be looking for some buying opportunities, targeting that upper trend line. And if we do see a break, can be targeting that resistance up there around 1.21800. Up next is Euro GBP. Sorry to interrupt the video guys, but if you are enjoying the content and you find it useful, make sure you go hit the subscribe button down below, and also make sure you drop a like as well. It really does help the channel out. But anyway, back to the video. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Euro GBP. So for Euro GBP, not too much happened. We just saw the market kind of be very corrective, pushing into our mid-level on the 4H. On the daily, we do have this range, which I was talking to you guys last week. Here's our support level, and there's our resistance here, and the market's kind of just fluctuating between these two levels and just moving sideways really. So for last week, we were looking at moves to the downside because the market was rejecting our kind of mid-level of this range, which is this level here. As you can see, support, resistance, support, bit of a break, false break there, support there again, and it is acting as resistance there as well. So last week I said if you do reject this area, can be looking for shorts and anticipation for another move to these lows here around 0.8500, which I'm still expecting coming next week there as well. So you can see we did fail to break through this resistance here. We had numerous tests, and just before the market closed, we saw a nice dump to the downside. So anticipating that to continue for next week. So can be looking for pullbacks on the low time frames, maybe the hourly, the 15-minute, and then look to anticipate a move back down to these lows here, because we are rejecting that mid-level quite firmly now. As you can see, numerous tests of that, and we are failing to break through. So anticipating a move to the downside for next week for Euro GBP. Of course, if the market does find some strength from somewhere and goes and breaks through that mid-level, then if it does hold at support, can look for buying opportunities, anticipate another move back into that resistance around 0.87. But I am favoring a move to the downside for Euro GBP. Looking at that structure there, very bearish here, failing to push through. So looking for pullbacks on the low time frames, anticipating a move into 0.8500 for next week. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. Okay, so for AUD USD this week, not too much happened. As you can see, going down to the 4H, the market is kind of just moving sideways. Clear level resistance here, 0.78, which we are continuously rejecting. We did see a bit of a false breakout, and last week I did say if you do reject this, can expect to see a move to the downside, because all we've had is just a false breakout. The market's come back for a retest. If it does reject that area, we can expect to see a move to the downside. And as you can see, we did see that dump to the downside. The market's also rejecting this support here, 0.77, and between this level here, 0.77 and 0.78, the market is just kind of just moving sideways, apart from that big false breakout that we had the other week. So for next week, I do expect to see another push to the upside for USD if we do hold this support, another swing and just continue that range. However, if we do see a break, can be looking for a bigger move to the downside, into this support here around 0.76. So two possible options there. If we do hold this and we see some nice bullish confirmations, can look for buys and anticipation of the market just giving us another swing to the upside and just continue the way it's been moving for the past few weeks now. But if we do see a breakout, can wait for the break, the retest, and look for move back down to around 0.76, because we could be seeing a breakout to the downside now after failing to break to the upside. So for AUSD, again, two possible opportunities. Key level, need to watch for price action on that level, see what happens even from a lower time frame, see if we're breaking through or if we're holding. If we are holding, again, look for those buys, another swing back to 0.78. If we're breaking through and we're starting to see some strong impulsive candles like we just saw there, then can be looking for sales on that retest, looking to target 0.76 all the way down there. Now let's take a look at NZD CAD. Okay, so for NZD CAD this week, as you can see, we saw more downside continuation. I did say last week that we do have this key level of support here in the market, and if you do reject that area as resistance, can look for sales, or reject as support, can look for buys. So last week we did close above it, and I said if we come back down, hold this area, can look for buys. However, we came back down, broke through it, saw the retest, and from there we clicked for our sales, push back down to these lows here, and as you can see, that's exactly what happened. Now price action actually broke through that area there again, so we're still looking very, very bearish. And as you can see there on the daily, the market is still very much trending to the downside, so pretty much as expected. So we do have these lows here. If I just connect it with that line, we are coming to those lows, and I'm expecting us to push through them and probably violate them. Same with these lows here as well. So I'm expecting more downside for NZD CAD, coming back down to 0.85750. So I'm expecting those lows to come back to be tested again. So for next week, expecting to see more retracement to the upside, and then more movement to the downside. So looking to see if we can get a push to these levels here. If you retrace back to this resistance, can we look for sales and move to the downside? Or if you break back above, can look to buy the market potentially for a push to the upside back to these levels here, that key level of resistance there on the daily. And if you do hold that, can look for sales and anticipation for a move to the downside. So kind of two levels to focus on for next week, around 0.86700 the first level. If we do reject that, can we look for sales? Or if we push through it, break, retest it, push back to this key level there, and again, can we look for some shorts again, and in preparation for a move lower. So bias is the downside for NZD CAD, but we might see a bit big of a retracement since we've just had a big move down, so that is still to take in count. But if we do have a move to the upside, it's likely just to be retracement for another bigger move to the downside. So looking for shorts around this area here, 0.86700, or if we break through that, likely to push to this level, and if we reject that, can we look for sales again around 0.87400. Next up, we've got GBP NZD. Okay, so for GBP NZD this week, we saw more upside continuation. Last week we were trading around this area here in the market. I think that was the last candle. As you can see, we had that gap to the upside, so we closed around there. I said if the market does hold this area of support, can possibly see a move to the upside, but if you do break through it and move back down to these lows here, and as you can see, that did not happen. The market held it as support and saw more continuation to the upside. So GBP is still looking quite bullish. You can see there on the daily, we do have this resistance which the market has come back to retest, and if you do hold it as resistance, which there's a good chance, as you can see, we've seen big moves to the downside from this level. We could actually see a nice potential shorting opportunity for GBP if we do hold this area. So looking for shorts around here. Be careful, because we could see maybe a bit of manipulation, since this is the third time we're coming back to test this area here on the daily. So we could see a spike above, and if that happens, wait for the market to get back underneath, and then you can look for some shorts. But there's also a possibility that if we do spike above, the market is just going to break through it and see some more continuation. So possible, could be used as support or resistance, depending if we're breaking above it or holding. But two possible opportunities there for buys and on the break and retest, or looking for sales if you just hold that as resistance. You can look for extra confirmation if we do go and break through this trend line here as well. So if you hold that, reject that area, break through the trend line, wait for the pullback, then look to ride that continuation back down. Or if we do go and break through that resistance there and hold it as support, can look for buys as well, with that confirmation of that trend line as well. So two possible opportunities. Important to see what the price act, what the market does, what type of price action we get at that resistance, see if we're breaking through it or holding. So far it does look like we're rejecting, so can wait for maybe the break of the trend line, the pullback, retest, and then the continuation lower. But if we do see some strength coming in for GBPUSD and we go and break through it early on in the week, can wait for the retest, see what happens. Maybe it's a false breakout, maybe it's not, but we'll find out with the price action we get when we are retesting it. And if we are, can look for longs, but if you do break below, again, that's a great confirmation. Wait for the pullback and then continue it much lower. So GBPUSD, possible buys and sells, but important to see what happens with price with that level. And then we can either look to buy the market using that level as support, or look to sell the market using that as resistance. Next, we're going to move on to CAD JPY. Okay, so now we've got CAD JPY. So CAD JPY still slowly pushing to the upside. However, on the 4H, we did break through our channel here in the market, as you can see, connecting those lows and connecting these highs here. We're pushing to the upside in that channel. We had a break, the retest, and the continuation to the downside, and so far we're pulling back up here. So as long as CAD JPY doesn't take out these previous highs around this level here, around 9600, looking for those sales for CAD JPY for a move to the downside, back down to this support here in the market. So looking for those shorts for next week, can even potentially wait for a break of this trend line here on the hourly, this counter trend line. And if you go and break through that, so you see the market trend break through that, can wait for the retest and the continuation lower. But either way, as long as we stay below this level here, so we don't we basically don't create some new highs, looking for those shorts and for move that down to 88,600. But if we do actually take out that resistance, the market's just turned bullish again, because again, monthly, weekly, daily is still pretty much pushing to the upside. But even though the 4H is giving us an indication that we could move lower, we still need to respect that. So if you do go and violate this high here and create some new highs, can wait for the retest. Of course, if it does hold that support, then look to buy it and continue that that trend to the upside. So two possible ideas there, favoring the move to the downside, but if we do go and violate that resistance, we'll change our bias and look for the continuations higher. But again, key level, anticipate what prices wants to do there, or if you do get a break of that trend line and the market doesn't quite reach that resistance, but looking for those shorts. But if you do take out that resistance and hold it as support, we'll flip my bias and look for those longs for next week. Up next is GBP USD. Okay, so next we've got GBP USD. So for this pair, overly still very bullish here, still pushing up, making higher highs, higher lows. We failed to take out this weekly high here in the market. As you can see, we came quite close to it. You can see better than the 4H, quite close to making those highs, which I was expecting this week, but as you can see, did not actually happen. We actually are starting to look a little bit bearish here for GBPUSD, rejecting that resistance once and the second time. So it might mean GBPUSD wants to take a bit of a dive to the downside, a bit of a deeper retracement before moving back up again. We do have this trend line here in the market, which will be acting as support as well. So if we do see a break of that trend line, can wait for the retest and the continuation lower. We do have this really nice area of resistance here in the market as well, which was eventually our previous high here before we did violate that and create some new highs, but we'll still be acting as resistance because we are trading below it now. So if you do take out that trend line, wait for the pullback and retest either the trend line or that resistance and look for a move to the downside. We'll be targeting the 1.4 region for GBPUSD, very key level of resistance and support here in the market. As you can see, tapped into it as support, nice push to the upside, resistance there as well. And if I do take this across, you can see resistance there as well. So very key area of resistance and support, which I do think the market, if we do break through that trend line, will potentially do. Looks like we're failing to create new highs there, potential double top. So a break of that trend line and then a pullback into that area, looking for those shorts, and we'll anticipate a move back down to 1.4 for next week for GBPUSD. And next we're going to see what's happening with GBP CAD. Okay, so for GBP CAD this week, not too much happened. As you can see on the daily price action, it's just consolidation really there on the daily. You can see in the 4H, not much clearer either. We did have this resistance here in the market, which we've been trying to break for the past couple of weeks now. As you see, we had a temp here, failed to do so, temp there again this week, failed to do so, and it looks like we're starting to turn bearish since we've had a break of this trend line here as well. So for GBP CAD, I'm expecting more continuation to the downside. First target will be this support here in the market, and the second target will be this support all the way down there. So for next week, looking to capitalize on a bit of a retracement, maybe a retest of that trend line and then move back down to that support. And if you do get a break, a retest, then move back down to that support there as well. So GBP CAD looking for more downside movement for this pair. If you do find some strength for someone and actually go and break through that trend line again, break through that resistance and start holding it as support, then yeah, we can be looking for buys. But at this moment in time, I'm not seeing that happen. So only looking for sales for next week for GBP CAD. Bit of retracement to get better risk to reward, so waiting for that retracement. Then we'll look at the lower time frames, hourly, 15-minute, on a move to the downside back into that support, and if we do break through it, back into those lows there. So GBP CAD biases to the downside unless we get back above that area, but I don't think we will. So only looking for sales. First target around the 1.7 200 area, the next target all the way down at 1.68600. Okay, up next we've got GBP JPY. Okay, so for pound JPY, not too much happened this week. As you can see in the daily, pretty much wicks all over the place, not really going anywhere. On the 4H, we did have this key resistance, which did break last week. Well, this week, as you can see, did break. Price was looking quite bullish, looked like it had a retest. However, it failed to continue and price broke below. So overall, pound JPY is still kind of moving sideways. We've got this key support here in the market, which I'm expecting to see a test of this week. As you can see, we've come back to retest this resistance, failed to break through it, big wick to the upside, come right back down. So nice to see a bit of a pullback on the lower time frames, hour, 15-minute, then get involved for a move to the downside and probably a move back up again, because as you can see, a lot of wicks at this area, market's holding. It's kind of the last barrier before we potentially could see a nice drop to the downside. So I am expecting to see a nice bounce from here and potentially another move back into that resistance. So expecting to see a bit of consolidation between these two levels for next week for pound JPY. If we do break that support, we'll probably see a move to come and retest this resistance here, which we broke through a couple of weeks ago, and as you can see, we didn't really get a retest of that area anyway. So a break of that support will probably take us down to this area here around 1.5 to 100. A little bit unlikely, but if it does, can be a really nice trade. But anyway, looking for a short to the downside back to this support 153,500, and if you do hold that as support there as well, we'll look for another move back to the upside, back to 154,300 for that resistance. And up next, we're going to take a look at gold. Okay, so now we'll take a look at gold. So for gold this week, as you can see, the price action is still very bullish. We're still pushing to the upside. Was expecting to see a bit more retracement to the downside this week. However, as you can see, we're far too bullish for that. We do have this key level in the market, which the market is now trading above. Very key level, as you can see, support, support, support. And the last time this actually held a support on the daily, actually gave us a big push to the upside all the way to 1950. So not saying we can get that big of a push, but I do think we'll get a bit more of a push to the upside now if we continue to hold this level of support. We do have this strong area of supply, which I think price is probably heading to next if we do manage to clear that resistance here, which it does look like price is doing so. Taking this down to the lower time frames, you can see we're moving to the upside quite correctively there. So not the cleanest price action here for gold, but we are still pushing to the upside. We'd like to see another retest of that support there. So if you do break to the downside, we'd like to see another retest of this 1860 level, so you can get some few wicks below it, so some nice rejection, and then look to target these highs all the way out there, which is that supply. So bias is very much to the upside. Well, first target would have to be this resistance, which sends us to the downside first. But if you do take out that resistance, then it probably would be that area of supply there on the daily, which is around 1912. So bias is to the upside for gold, expecting more continuation as long as we hold 1680, which is that daily key level. As long as we hold this level, more continuation to the upside. We'd like to see a bit more retracement first, and then look for the buys and take this higher. So overall, expecting more continuation to the upside for gold as long as we don't see daily close below this area, and then we'll look to target these highs here, this resistance, and then if we break through that, 1912 all the way up there. And last but not least, we've got Bitcoin. And now we've got Bitcoin. So for Bitcoin this week, we saw a big crash to the downside, as you can see there. I did say last week we've got this key level of support, 44,000. If we do see a break of that, we could possibly see a bigger push to the downside. We did have this key structural low here in the market. I can see if I zoom out a little bit, we've had this big push to the upside. This is kind of like our last major higher low, big push to the upside. So this is now the market coming for like a double bottom of that higher low, and potentially could see Bitcoin push the upside back to the highs from there. So potentially could see that bigger trend to the upside continue for Bitcoin as long as we hold this support, getting that double bottom, and then continue to the upside. But looking at this from a 4-hourly point of view, more short-term bias, more immediate price action, you can still see we're quite bearish here. The market is still making lower lows, lower highs. So as you can see, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high. So it's still making lower highs. So overall, we're still quite bearish. Got this trend line here intact. So I think for Bitcoin for next week, there's a possibility, if we still reject that trend line, to push back down to these lows here again. Break through that trend line, we'll probably push back to 44,000, which is that key level of resistance, key level of support, sorry, which is now resistance, which could still send us back down to the downside. But if we do clear that level and break through that 44,000, hold it as support. And I think this is a really good area to look to buy Bitcoin for long term, because this is a key level of support which could give us a big move to the upside. If I zoom out, you can see here we tested it once there, second time here, and this actually gave us a big move all the way up to 61,000. So I think if we do get back above 44,000 and hold it as support, that could be a really nice place to buy for the long term and look to push Bitcoin to new highs. But right now we are still quite bearish here, and if we do reject that trend line that I've just drawn connecting these highs here, could actually send us back down to 30,000. Break of that trend line will probably take us back to 44,000, but as resistance, which could still reject us to the downside. So again, it's still very much a bearish market. So I'm not saying we're going to fly to the upside now, but it's still very much a bearish market. If we get above 44,000, then we can be looking for those buys, for the long-term buys. But risky to buy it now because we could still move to the downside. Possibly will be better to buy at the 30,000 mark when we've got this long wick. But right now, yeah, still very bearish. Probably roll over to the downside. If you do break through the trend line, we'll probably push to 44,000. So expecting to see either Bitcoin roll back over, or if you do get a break of that trend line, a push to 44,000 for next week. And if you get above it, maybe a bigger push after that. Okay, so that is the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed that and found that useful. Like always, guys, if you have any questions, agree or disagree with my analysis, just let me know. Drop a comment down below and I will get back to you. Make sure you subscribe and also drop a like if you enjoyed it. But thanks, guys, for watching, and until the next one, I'll see you guys later.